All right, before we start the show, we need to say that this episode of Dopey is brought to you by our friends at Oro Recovery, founded by Bob Forrest and his friends, Evan, Jared, and Bob, with the mission of creating a treatment that helps alcoholics and addicts with compassion and connection rather than control. Their staff has decades and decades and decades of experience in treating co-occurring mental health disorders. They make sure that your detox is as comfortable as possible. And I actually just met a guy who went to Oro from this ad, and he said, I think the word he used was plush, but he also said it was an incredible experience and they treated him right, which is what I love to hear about. They are very, very highly rated and reviewed. Their amenities are out of control. Fucking surfing, equine therapy, the potentially spiritually transformative sweat lodge, and so much other stuff. If you're fucked and you're willing to go to sunny Southern California, I cannot suggest going to Oro enough. Sometimes I think about relapsing just to go to Oro. I'm just kidding. Check them out at ororecovery.com. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by our very good friends at Sober Buddy. What is Sober Buddy? It's an app in your phone, in your pocket, so there's always a Sober Buddy in your pocket, but it's so much more. It is a community. We've started doing Zooms at Sober Buddy. We're even doing a Dopey Zoom on Wednesdays. And if you're interested in going to the Dopey Wednesday Zoom, hit me up. Maybe I can get you in there. Who knows? Last week we talked about triggers. They do like 6 Zooms a week. The community is building. They provide support. They offer challenges. There's a tracker on the app. It is a new growing resource for you if you are wanting to get sober or you're interested in getting sober. Check them out at yoursoberbuddy.com or on the App Store or the Google Play Store. It's Your Sober Buddy. This episode of Dopey is brought to you by our friends at SoberLink. We need to talk about alcohol recovery in the workplace. Talking about sobriety and providing it to your employer can be so difficult, and our friends at SoberLink want to help. If you need a reliable way to present documented proof of sobriety to a boss or a loved one, SoberLink can help. SoberLink is a high-tech portable breathalyzer system that uses facial recognition technology to verify identity. It has unique sensors to ensure that no other air sources are being used, and it sends direct results to your specified contacts. So there's no questioning whether or not you took the test and whether or not you altered the reporting. This is why SoberLink's remote alcohol monitoring system is considered the gold standard. Being in recovery from alcohol does not define the future of your career. Let SoberLink help. Learn more about SoberLink and request an exclusive $50 off promo code by visiting www.soberlink.com/dopey. Again, www.soberlink.com/dopey. Enough with the ads. Here is the fucking show. Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. Oh my fucking Christ. My name is David, and I'm at my house. I'm in the Dopey studio, in the Dopey suite, and I swear to God, I'm losing my mind. It's like I have this beautiful equipment, but sometimes it just doesn't work, and it just failed, and I had to reset to factory settings. It can't detect my Wi-Fi. It turned into French. You know, it's giving me French, passé. It's asking me weird French questions, and I thought I was going to, have a heart attack and use the old technology for all of you old school dopes. But it's working, so thank God. Thank God it's working. I hate not knowing how stuff works. I really need to take a crash course. I need to, do a YouTube video. There's a lot of stuff happening, all right? There is a lot of stuff happening. Today on the show, we have I don't know why I think of it as a sort of holiday episode, but it felt like a holiday episode while I was recording. I was recording with Tom Farley, the oldest of the Farley brothers. The most famous of the Farley brothers, of course, was Chris Farley, of Saturday Night Live, Tommy Boy, Black Sheep, all that stuff. Chris Farley, of course, died many years ago. He was a legendary comic, legendary actor, legendary addict and alcoholic. And it was random. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but when you write me an email or send me a voicemail, I'm sure a lot of you know this, you send it to dopeypodcast@gmail.com. A lot of you guys message me on Instagram and Facebook, and the messages go to weird places. And somebody messaged me on Facebook. It went to some meta messaging thing, and they had met Tom Farley, and they asked him if he wanted to come on Dopey, I think. I don't know. They sent me a picture of his business card, and I called him, and he said he wanted to come on. And then he said he was going to be in town next week. So we made a time, and I went up to 57th Street in Lexington to this swanky hotel, and I met him and his mother, who, of course, is also Chris Farley's mother. And the hotel was hustling and bustling, and it was near Bloomingdale's and, you know, Christmas time in the city. It's all happening. So it felt very Christmas-like. And also to be talking about his family made it feel very Christmassy. I got a message on Twitter that I would like to read. It's a long message. But first, I actually just got an email from Hardcore Dope and also friend of the show. He gave me a cane made out of weed. We call him Cane Strains or Strain Canes. I'm going to pop him up right now. Hold on. Strain Canes. He says, Dave, can you do me a quick favor? And Strain Cane sent me a beautiful walking stick made out of marijuana, I guess, and it's awesome. I have it on my porch. He says, Dave, can you do me a quick favor? I'd love to know the lyrics to your intro song, When You Feel Like No One Understands Your Affliction. And so I played it on the show, and we're going to go through the lyrics right now. So hold on. Let me see if I can technically set this up for you guys. And if you didn't know, the songwriter and performer of the song is Alan A. from Ireland. I don't know if Alan A. is still listening, but here we go. I'm going to play the song again.
You feel like no one understands your affliction.
If you feel like no one understands your affliction. Here, I'm going to keep playing it.
When you feel like no one's home, so alone in your addiction.
When you feel like no one's home, so alone in your addiction.
Well, if your deal lives left, then put your headphones on and walk to the right.
I'm not sure what he says there. Is if your gear is life? I don't know what he says there. Alan A., if you're out there, let me know. If somebody can understand this Irishman or Scotsman or Englishman, I don't even know exactly where Alan A. is from. But I think he says, if your gear is life, then put your headphones on and walk to the right. Again, if you know the lyrics, just send them into dopeypodcast@gmail.com.
Cause there's a nation out there, keep you safe, keep you clean, at least for tonight.
Because there's a nation out there, keep you safe, keep you clean, at least for tonight.
So pay attention, Dopey Nation, the afflicted wanna reminisce.
So pay attention, Dopey Nation. The afflicted want to reminisce. And then the next part really gets me choked up.
Pay attention, Dopey Nation, for our fallen brothers Todd and Chris.
To this day, that part always gives me the chills. He says, pay attention, Dopey Nation, to our fallen brothers Todd and Chris. And then he has audio of Chris saying toodles that he slows down. So it sounds really trippy and sad, and it always gives me the chills. And then let's see what's next.
Life seems like a curse, put the hearse in reverse, put a smile on your face at last.
And now he really gets into the lyricism, the artistry of lyrics. He says, like life seems like a curse. You put the hearse in reverse, put a smile on your face at last or and laugh. Let me hear. Hold on.
Life seems like a curse, put the hearse in reverse, put a smile on your face at last.
Maybe it's put a smile on your face that lasts. I don't know. Again, I'm very interested in your opinion. Here's the end of it.
So pay attention, Dopey Nation. It's time for the Dopey Podcast.
He says, pay attention, Dopey Nation. It's time for the Dopey Podcast. Man, I think this theme song is fucking good. Hold on. Here's the end of it.
Stay strong, Dopey Nation. Time for Dave and the Dopey Podcast.
And then I get the chills again every time here. He says, hold on, what does he say? He says, stay strong, Dopey Nation. Time for Dave and the Dopey Podcast, which always, hits me right in the heart. And then he does the real crazy thing where he plays the slowed down me and Chris laughing into the real theme song of the show, which, if you didn't know, is called If I'm Not Home, I'm Out Walking Around. And here's the ending of it. Here's the big finish.
Stay strong, Dopey Nation. Time for Dave and the Dopey Podcast.
I love this song so much. So I want to thank Alan A. again. I think I've thanked him many times, but I want to thank him again for writing such also TV style theme song. Love it. Fucking amazing. If you're a songwriter out there, you want to try your hand at a Dopey theme song, maybe you'll get a little thing like this, a little spotlight on your music. Check out Alan A. Alan A, remind me how they can check you out. He's from Ireland. And we went in depth one time, me and my father, maybe 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago, me and my dad did a Patreon episode dedicated to the music of Dopey. And you get to hear his opinions about it. So that's it's a subtle calling out to you guys to join Patreon. Patreon has so much good stuff. I just recorded 2 bonus Patreon episodes with Aaron Carr. Really good stuff. So go to Patreon. And I also keep putting up these old videos. I put up a video of me interviewing KRS-One. I put up an interview of me at this hippie festival in 1999 called Gathering of the Vibes, and Merle Saunders is there, and what's his face? This guitar player that I'm not thinking of. Fucking shit. I can't think of his name. Ridiculous. Some kind of jazz, hippie jazz guitar player. And the dude from Mo is there. Oh, John Schofield is his name. And I'm really high, and there's really high hippies there. And then, of course, we do the Dopey Patreon Zoom. There's, of course, a ton of giveaways and stuff. So go to Patreon. Support Patreon. I'm thinking of changing Patreon and doing more Zooms and meetings, but more will be revealed with that. Now, before I say anything else, I want to give a big shout out to Matt Shoemaker. I'm not sure why. I think your sister hooked you up with something, and maybe an anniversary is coming up. She just wants me to give you a shout out. So shout out to Matt Shoemaker. And I want to shout out Edward Alliser and the newly formed Dopey Podcast, Dopey Nation digital street team. If you're interested in doing that, get a hold of him. If you're interested in being an intern, our intern program is really shaping up. Shit is happening. This young woman, Claire from Canada, is a very, very type A person, and she's making shit happen. So we need help. I also have this guy, Mitch, in Australia, who's making stuff happen. There is stuff to do to push this thing forward. I know there's some of you out there who don't think we should have interns, but I think we should, because if the Dopey empire can be more successful, interns could have Dopey careers one day, which I think would be incredible. Claire's actual first mission is she set up a merch giveaway on Instagram where you share your name, you share Dopey and your story, and you have a chance to win, some DopeyCon merch. There's a DopeyCon hoodie, there's some Dopey hoodies, some stuff. And she feels like you guys didn't actually participate enough in this Instagram giveaway. So fucking go participate in this Instagram giveaway. Follow us on social media. Don't be a stranger. Follow us everywhere. I've also been using this other sober app. It's called Sober Together, and I've gotten a bunch of Dopey people to go on there. It's a really interesting app. You go on the app and you talk to a camera, and you check in, and then people see what you say about how you feel or recovery, or you tell a Dopey story, and then people respond, and it creates this whole universe of addicts and alcoholics helping each other. It's called Sober Together. It's available on the App Store. It's not available for Android users yet. There's a ton of Dopey people in there. I've been posting every day for like 11 days. So go to Sober Together, check it out. They're really nice people. The guy who actually created it also created the cartoon Storybots, and he created that old crazy weird thing called Jib Jab, where like your head goes on the elves and they dance and stuff. He's brilliant, and I think he really wants to help addicts. So go to Sober Together. Oh yeah, it's free. It's fucking free, and you can talk to people and they can talk to you, and it's sweet. So go to Sober Together. I have to say, I've been doing pretty good of late, and I've been doing good because I'm like doing good things. You know, they say when you make a record, like if you record music, if you have like shit going into the mix, shit always comes out of the mix. And if you've ever heard the horrible sounding Dopey episodes of the past, it's the same thing with that. The truth is, if you put good things in, you get good things out. And I've been reading, and I'm rereading Siddhartha, which me and Chris used to talk about. Haven't read it in years. It's so fucking good. I'm interested in like having you guys read Siddhartha and doing like a new Dopey book club. So if any of you guys are interested in doing a Siddhartha Dopey book club, hit me up at dopeypodcast@gmail.com. I'm also reading this book by Johan Hari called Stolen Focus. I think he's coming back on the show in January, but his book it's very beautiful, and it just made me feel better. I feel like too much time on the phone, and I don't know. Stolen Focus, it's a really, really interesting book. I recommend reading books. It can make you feel good. I also started talking to an online therapist, which has also been amazing because he's asking me questions like, how do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to have? And like, what do I want it to look like? Which are basic questions. I just never asked them before, really. I just was like, how can I not be a miserable junkie? How can I whatever? But he's asking some interesting questions, and I'm answering them, which is why I need to tell you that this episode of Dopey is sponsored by BetterHelp. I wish that life came with a user's manual, but I find that when I get support online in therapy, I understand how to operate my life better. Navigating life can be very complex, and it's great talking to somebody, especially somebody trained to figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/dopeypodcast. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/dopeypodcast. Now let's get to Tom Farley. I want to say this. Chris Farley was a brilliant comedian, a brilliant actor, and seeming like just a great guy. I remember when I was growing up, he was like part of the new vanguard of Saturday Night Live, and he was so exciting and funny. But what I really remember about Chris Farley is that when I was using, he died of an overdose from speedballs. And I remember using and watching like the E! True Hollywood Story and watching these documentaries about him. And it was really surreal to meet his brother and to meet his mother, because I felt so plugged in on his story. And talking to his brother was incredibly cool. He was super honest, he was super candid, and he was super open and generous. So without further ado, here he is, older brother of Chris Farley, Tom Farley, author, marketing expert, rehab outreach guru, and again, brother of Chris Farley. Here we go. I'm in a very intimate yet swanky hotel room with Tom Farley. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here. And yeah, I think the closeness is going to add to the
the intimacy of the dynamic.
Absolutely.
And Tom is from, where are you from?
Madison, Wisconsin. That's where we grew up, all of us. And I still live there.
And Tom is the older brother of comedy legend, addict legend, Chris Farley. And whenever I bring up anything about Chris Farley, everyone just says, that's the fucking funniest guy that ever lived.
I'm all these years later, and after writing a book about him and interviewing all his friends and people that knew him, I'm finally coming around to that. But it started with me having to be the older brother and sharing a bedroom with this maniac. And I'm like, I would tell my friends, stop laughing at this guy. It's not funny. And it was obviously the stuff he did was hysterical from, right out of the box. But as an older brother, it was just like, this is embarrassing.
How many brothers in the room?
I was the oldest. We have an older sister, Barb. And then I was the oldest of 4 boys. So it was me, Chris, and then Kevin and Johnny.
All in the same room?
Oh, no, in the same room? No, it was Kevin and Johnny slept together, and then Chris and I were, and for a long time, till I just, like, when we got closer to high school, I'm like, that's it. They literally created a room out of a little sitting room down the hall. I'm like, yeah, this has got to stop.
Did you get the room down the hall?
I got the room initially. And then when I went to college, he moved into that room. And then when he went to college, my dad just literally gutted it. He put like a hot tub in there because it was just like, all right, this is done.
And I know Kevin is a comedian, an actor.
I've heard that too.
And did he do that before or after Chris?
No, Kevin was getting his MBA, and he got his MBA, and he was going to work for my father, just like kind of Chris did. And then Chris just kind of like blew up, when he was on SNL. And I think both my brothers kind of went, yeah, that's what we're doing. As the oldest brother, I was like, I didn't know that was an option. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like literally all of a sudden, all my brothers were down that road, making great careers. Now my son is out in LA. He went through Second City, and he's out in LA now, continuing that.
And you didn't consider it for a second?
No, it was interesting. I was always in business here in New York I was in financial services doing marketing, but I loved my audience. I was always that crazy marketing guy. So I loved that. Now when I started doing public speaking with the Chris Farley Foundation and just with my book and what I do now, like when I step on a stage and I look at, after a whole like career lifetime of just boring, presentations and PowerPoints, I love just being on stage with an audience, just kind of watching me. I get why my brothers and my son went into this field because
But the pressure wasn't on you to get the laugh. You can just chill and then get the laugh because
actually, no. The funny thing is, there was pressure. There was always like, oh, Chris Farley's brother. Well, okay, be Chris Farley's brother. And honestly, if I have to, if I'm being rigorously honest, that probably triggered a lot of my alcoholism, trying to be that role for the longest time. And I knew it wasn't right. It was an odd fit. And I drank
to be fun.
Not to be fun. We were always funny. But it was just, if they wanted to see, this crazy Farley guy, which wasn't me, okay, I'll give it to him. But I need fuel.
See, that's really interesting to me. And I also want to share this. Somebody in the audience, some stalwart audience member, messaged me in a place where I don't even get messages. And they're like, oh, I just met Chris Farley's brother. You need to reach out. And then me being the way I am, rather than emailing you, I just call you, give it a shot.
Yeah.
And you answered the phone. And I was like, oh, I heard you on Artie Lang's podcast. And you were like, I don't remember being on Artie Lang's podcast. And I was like, you were. I heard you on it. And it turned out it was your brother.
It was Kevin, yeah. Those two seemed like they were a good fit, yeah.
But I want to uncover and unpack everything you just said in terms of like you're working for the Chris Farley Foundation and you get sober in that situation, which seems like a really interesting story. But what was it like at home in the first place? Was there alcoholism in the house? Was there addiction?
Growing up?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like part of my talks now is I open with like we had like all of the boxes checked. We had this long family history of alcoholism, on both sides. We were Irish, and we lived in Wisconsin, and everyone knows the Wisconsin story. So, I mean, what's interesting in all of those cases, our family, being Irish and living in Wisconsin, drinking and actually drinking to excess is so normative that, it's just, that's what you do. And that's what we did.
So paint the picture for anybody who's not Irish and from Wisconsin.
Well, it's just, it's just always there. And it's not like
Culturally,
it's just part of the shtick. And it's just like Harry Potter had his wand. We had a scotch, it was Irish whiskey. I mean, it was just, that was our thing. And it was just always around, and every event, every interaction, it was just omnipresent.
Did you find yourself drinking to excess as a teenager? Like, did you find yourself predisposed to alcoholism as a kid?
I mean, it was very quickly, and it was drinking mostly, that I just had no off switch. It was amazing. Once I started, because I always felt like I wasn't, up to par with the people I went to Georgetown. I went to, boarding school in, out east, and I'm like, so I felt like such a fraud. Like, I'm not smart as these people. I mean, obviously I got in, but I'm like, I just didn't feel like I belonged. And so I drank because I had this massive self-doubt. I only know this now looking back. I work in treatment, and I'm like hearing these things, and these moments are like, oh my God, is that what I was going?
That sounds familiar, right?
Yeah. I'm like, now I get it.
Right. And you were obviously a high achiever. You got into Ivy League school. Do you think that affected Chris, where Chris was like, oh shit?
100%. That was my family. It's like, you have to, this is where you gotta do this. And he wanted to be his own. He definitely, I think, it started off at Chris, if I have to be, if I have to analyze him, I think it always started off with this kind of low self-esteem that was fueled by this body image. He was always a husky kid. And so, my mom's from Boston, so she was always dressing us up in just, like
leprechauns or something? No, you look beautiful.
That's how I always dress, though. I mean, she had us in Wisconsin wearing Lily Pulitzer. I'm like, do you want me to get beat up, Mom? But, we were always in nice Brooks Brothers, and Chris with his, and that just isn't, he was always kind of in the,
trying to burst out of his clothing.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't look right. That was valued in my family, and he didn't value it. And so he didn't feel valued, I think, by just the way kind of all this pressure. Like, you're going to go to this school. And he did. He was a smart guy. He got into Marquette, got through Marquette quicker than I got through Georgetown. He actually did the 4 years. I added a few.
And was there alcoholism evident between the two of you before fame and, success and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, it's Wisconsin. So legal age in Wisconsin when we were growing up was 18.
Right.
So, which means that, it's 16.
What was the age difference
between Chris and I? Just shy 2 years older.
So you would party together?
Yeah. I mean, as much as we could. As I said, Chris was always just going a little farther down the road than I was comfortable doing. So, but
what did that look like, though?
Well, what was really weird is that I was just, as I said, kind of before, I had this massive self-doubt. I didn't feel comfortable with people. And I couldn't talk to girls. In high school in Wisconsin, everyone, if you were a jock, you had it all. And I was a good athlete. I wasn't, but I did the weird, I wasn't the football, baseball. I was the soccer, swimmer, weird stuff.
I thought you were going to say fencing. But not.
You don't want to put any sharp objects in any of our hands. So I just always kind of felt uncomfortable. Then I would look at Chris, who, and the whole time trying to maintain this, toe the line, as I say, like my parents wanted us to do. And I'm like, I was all in. I'm like, okay, I'll do this, and I'll try I want to go to a good school. And I was doing all this just endless work to do that. And I turn around, and Chris was just being himself and, tripping over that line that I was trying to do, and just doing everything opposite of me. Looked like he was having a lot more fun. And as he always did, he had friends everywhere. He had, and not just friends, but he had core ensemble level great friends. And that, as an older brother, I'm just like, why is it so hard for me? And it's so easy for him. And I think, Chris drank for his reasons. I drank for that reason. So I'm like, I'm not comfortable. Something is not working for me.
And he obviously had insane discomfort in his own skin.
Yeah.
Because of his weight, because of his brain. And obviously he was, you know, a world-class drug addict. You know what I mean? Like, as we like to say. And I think for an older brother to be envious of a younger brother's ease, it's a real pressure because you're supposed to be who he looks up to. And it creates, and I'm sure just I can tell by just the way you're talking about it, how kind he probably was to you and how tight you guys actually were.
We first of all, we're Irish, so it always broke into a fight at some point. But you know, that was the Irishness of it. You know, it was just we had very short fuses. But on the same token, you know, and this was my parents, just like we were always together. We did everything together, you know, so we did love each other. And we had our back. And if anyone ever went after one of my brothers, particularly Chris, like called him fat or something like that, I was like right there. Let's go. It was go time. Yeah, I defended the hell out of him, even though I had just gotten a fight with him 2 seconds ago. I'm like, if I can do that, you can't.
So in the Farley household, what came first? Comedy, alcohol, or drugs?
Okay, now you just really, this is, when I talk about being in treatment and having those aha moments, this was one of the first things. When I started at Rosecrans, I was asked to be a speaker on our alumni retreat. They had a weekend of all the alumni that came through our program. And they wanted me to kind of, you know, I was there maybe a couple months and said, can you speak and tell your story and kind of be the last speaker, kind of, you know, bring on the clowns kind of thing. And I said, sure. And I was listening to all these clinicians kind of get on board, you know, and I was listening to this one of our clinicians I worked with, and she was talking about trauma. And I'm like, well, I know what trauma is. You know, your life is going this way and then trauma, and now it's like left turn, and which is, you know, for the big T trauma. And she was talking about something totally different. All these other things, you know, these little traumas that you accumulate over your lifetime that you don't even know they're there, but you eventually have to address and manage those emotions, hopefully in a safe and healthy way, but a lot of us not so much. And so I'm listening, and by the time it got to me, I went, whoa, time out. I'm going to tell my story later, but I got to process this. I go, do you know what trauma was like in my family, in the Farley family? And every time I like tell this story, everyone's like, ooh, no, what? I'm like, no, it's not that. Trauma was that we literally had one emotion. I call it one bullet in our emotional, you know, gun. One emotion that we used for everything. Obviously, that was humor. So if somebody was stressed out in my family, we laughed. If somebody like fell and hurt themselves, we laughed. Not to be mean, we didn't like their pain. We didn't like seeing other people in pain, and we thought that our humor could bring them out of it. If somebody was frustrated, angry, we definitely laughed if they're angry. And if somebody was experiencing joy, we laughed, which isn't the same thing. We couldn't even go to the positive end. And we got obviously really good at it because all three of my brothers became professionals. Now my son's doing it. But we didn't develop any of these other emotions so that coping mechanism of humor turned into a trauma. And I'm literally at this webinar going, oh, that's it? That's what's going on? That's what and I notice that now when we get, like my sister particularly, she'll be talking about something. It's like, oh, so-and-so lost his job. I'm like, that's not funny, Barb.
Right.
You know, but that's...
I do the same stuff. My wife gets angry at me because I try to relate to my older daughter only with comedy.
Yeah.
And like, no matter what. And I think it's funny when I threaten to beat her. Like, I think that's funny. I'm going to give you the old one too. And I've never touched my daughter violently.
No.
I think beating my kid sounds funny when I say it, but it's not funny.
It's not being perceived the same way. It's like when my kids...
She used to think it was funny. She doesn't think it's funny anymore.
When my kids were growing up with little kids, and they're like, Daddy, I'm afraid of the dark. And I would like go, oh, yeah, well, I would too if I had that under my bed.
Right.
You know, and like these kids are terrified now.
Right.
You didn't help them. You made it worse.
Right.
And I didn't get it. I didn't know. That's how I...
Because we want to relate and we want to make someone feel comfortable. Yeah. And in both of our experiences, comedy brought people close to us and it disarmed them. And Chris was one of the great masters. I mean, it's amazing that your brother was one of the great masters at this.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, and humor is that power. It really is one of the greatest emotions to manage our emotions. But there's also other things too, like empathy and all these other things that can manage your emotions too.
There's so many good things that you can use that aren't comedy. Empathy's. My wife is a social worker, and she has a lot of really good tools. And sometimes I'm like, that's so cheesy. Don't do that. But it's a great tool, and it's another way to bring somebody close to you.
Well, like until I got into, I remember the first time I got into recovery, and I started really exploring some of these other emotions. And I'm like, for the first time in my life, and like they said, like one of the first things, like, well, do a gratitude journal. I remember the first time I would go, okay, Tom Farley's gratitude journal, and I'm like, for the next hour, looking at this blank page, going, really, nothing? You're not grateful for anything? And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful for things, but it was hard for me to identify and go there. I was thinking like the big gratitude things. I'm so grateful for my kids. And I'm like, no, it's these little things that happen every day you're missing. These
like mindful moments, like to enjoy the sky or the lobby or your mom being funny or whatever.
I'm grateful that I have a moment of my day where I can think of these things. Grateful for just that moment. Yeah. So.
There's a guy at my meeting, and he says, I want you to try to come up with something you're not great. He's so about gratitude. He's like, what are you not grateful for?
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I can make a long list because I have problems. But he's like, he can't identify one thing he's not grateful for.
Wow.
Which is a beautiful thing. He's Johnny Jukebox. He has jukeboxes in the Bronx, and he collects the money out of the jukeboxes.
Oh, that's so neat.
He'll be on Dopey eventually. You can hear his story.
Oh, that's good.
Now, I think it's really interesting. Like, I think, first of all, I was like starstruck to meet Chris Farley's mother. You saw my face?
I was so excited that you caught us in the lobby. It's like, this is the one.
Is that annoying for somebody like to meet me and me have this weird reaction to your mother?
We're so used to it's so part of our life now. And I love it. We all know that mom is just, first of all, it's where we get all of our, she's this Boston Irish. And my grandfather, her father, was just crazy. Just so awesome and fun. And so that's where that, my dad had the really conservative, safe, he had a great sense of humor, and he told the right joke in the right audience. He was just great, and he had this magnetism. But my mom had this fearlessness, and she does, this whole fearlessness of comedy.
I offered to take her bag, and she gave me this look like, I'm not crippled, you fucking idiot. It was a look.
Yeah, I got that all through LaGuardia just now. Like, Mom, can I take the bag? No, you just go. Let's go.
Now, you're in recovery. When did alcoholic consequences show their face for you?
When did I? Well, I mean, if I look back, I mean, I can see it all over the place. I mean, kind of, it's a joke amongst my college buddies. Like, another business card, Tommy. I mean, job losses like all over the place. Divorce, just financial. It was just always some little struggle, and of course, always somebody else's fault. So
unable to find your part.
Yeah. So I mean, all of that stuff. That's what I said. Like, there were times that I had pulled together many years of sobriety, yet I was still causing these train wrecks. But it wasn't until I got in recovery that I realized that sobriety just gave me the clarity to deal on the real stuff, the mind stuff that I was going through, that how I process stuff. That was an amazing moment. But I look back and I'm like, there's so many, if all you've got again is working on your humor to make relationships, those aren't going to be very functioning relationships
because it's one note.
Yeah,
because it can't be multidimensional.
Right.
And when's the first time you saw that Chris was going to have a really hard time existing in this world?
Well, it was
it's the same thing. It's that double-edged sword.
Yeah. Well, he came out here, and it's funny because my dad was like, I don't understand how he can't manage his drinking. I go to work every day, and we're like, okay, Dad, you work for yourself. So when you walk in at 10 o'clock, no one's yelling at you. I get fired. You don't.
So when's the first time was it clear that he couldn't manage?
When he got
his
out
drinking?
here and he got this literally the dream job of his life.
He comes to New York.
I was in New York. I was in New York, and he came in, and like, oh my God. And we're still like, oh my God, this is really happening. It was, that alone was a funny story when he,
Tell the story. I'd like to hear.
well, it was interesting. So I lived in Upper East Side, and he was at Second City. He's like, I'm coming in, and they're putting me up at at the Intercontinental, but it really wasn't an audition like you see people's audition tapes, old audition SNL tapes. That wasn't it. It was just Chris coming in to meet people. Lauren had already
decided.
Absolutely. So he spent the day kind of like on the 17th floor at 30 Rock. Actually, it was a Saturday, so it was down at 8H, just kind of watching people, just kind of like, does he fit in? Do you like him? And then at like about 6 o'clock, he gives me this call. It's like, and just kind of, you could barely hold it in. Like, do you want to go to SNL tonight? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, they're letting us go. So we went that night, and we're like, the two of us, like, this is on. We were like in Lauren's office, kind of overlooking 8H, and there was kind of like a sliding glass door that looks out into the sets, and we're like, there were just so many things going on. We're like pinching ourselves, like, this is not. It was just two brothers at this amazing event experience, not even thinking for a second that one of them was gonna like that was gonna be his.
Well, one of the greatest attributes of your brother was his humility. Like his humility,
absolutely.
you don't even know him, but you could just feel it coming off of him. And I can imagine like that's like before stardom. So the humility is like compounded with fear and excitement and adrenaline, and it's like it's an amazing story. Do you think when Lauren is like, I want Chris to be in this thing, he's like, I found my new Belushi? Do you think that was a thought in his head?
I don't know how you can't. Yeah, I mean, there was that. What Chris brought. And again, this is the similarities with John is because of where they learned their craft, at Second City from the same guy, Del Close, who said to Chris, same thing he said to Belushi, you've got to just attack the stage and kill the audience. It was just, don't leave anything. You just put it all out there. And obviously Belushi said, okay to that. And Chris said the same thing. And I think after kind of in that 90s where, there was still, the comedy was, the Seinfeld with the skinny black tie, kind of humor. There was also this kind of grunge in the music. There was like, we need that.
This undercurrent.
Yeah, we
punk.
need that danger. We need back in SNL. And I think they got it in spades with Chris. And that was, again, the legacy of Belushi and Del. And
Did he talk about John Belushi, Chris?
Not really. I mean, he was growing up, he read Wired, and he was like, wow, that's, holy shit. He was like freaked out by that. Like that was, the drugs and everything, and it's funny. When I wrote my book, I wrote it with Tanner Colby, who had done previously a book similar on Belushi. So Tanner's like, he's got both of these people totally in his cranium, the poor guy. He's the subject matter expert on Chris and Belushi. And we've had these talks. And he said, honestly, Tom, like I've studied them both. And it's like, Chris didn't want to be Belushi. He at one point, John Belushi was the most famous person on the planet. For 2 years, there was nowhere he could go. And Chris goes, that's what I want. And I will pay whatever price it is. I don't want to be that person. And Chris could never be John Belushi because Belushi was kind of, a little dark. And there was so much of Chris that was so the opposite.
So light. And so innocent. And Belushi, his comedy wasn't based on innocence.
Yeah, so he was never going to be like John. But Chris just wanted that level. He wanted, and he also wanted to stand out above the crowd as this different kind of comedy. John Belushi brought this different element to the comedy field, and Chris goes, I want to stick out like that.
Did you see there was a documentary on Showtime like a few years ago. It was called Belushi. It was really good documentary.
Finally, yeah. I don't know if I did see that.
It's painful. It's an amazing documentary just about addiction and kind of the psyche of somebody like Belushi who died from addiction and his story. I totally recommend it. It's really crazy. Did Chris grow up doing drugs? Were you doing drugs as a kid?
No.
And he didn't either. No, not even.
No, not at all. Like, Chris didn't even start drinking till it was like late in his junior in high school, and so he would have been 17. And as I said, drinking he was 18. So, and that was just like, wow. What was interesting about like all of my family, as I said, we came from all these elements of normative drinking. But my sister, Barb, to this day can have like a couple glasses of wine and
She doesn't have
that's it.
Right.
Kevin, Johnny, and I have no off switch. I mean, when we start drinking, it's go time till we pass out or whatever. And then Chris, it was not just drink, but it was always what's the next thing. He had that drug kind of, I need something more, something different. He was, because as you can tell from his comedy, he was a risk taker, and he was that way with his substances too.
How old were you the first time you had a drink?
Drink?
Yeah.
A freshman year in high school, I guess.
So just a couple years younger than he was, but you started a bit earlier.
Yeah. And then sophomore year, I got in with a crowd. I didn't play a sport one season, and I got in with this pot crowd. And I, like that, my sophomore year in high school, it was just, I was that kid. I'm like, and I came out of that.
That kid being a stoner kid?
Yeah. And I came out of that going, that sucked. I didn't like the people I was hanging out with. I was kind of like, and I said this to Chris years later, I said, like, Chris, these aren't your friends. You got to, like, what, for lack of a better word, I got, at that moment after that year, I said, I got really kind of snobby about who I was hanging out with. And Chris, just that word alone was like, no, these are good people. I'm like, okay, he just like, they're not.
He wanted everyone to love him.
Absolutely. So he wasn't going, yeah, you are a snob. I'm like, okay. I'm just trying to protect myself. If that's what, and I'm just calling it that, but I just didn't like being in these shitty apartments or somebody's shitty basement. And
my wife says dirt bags.
Yeah, that's it.
My
That's
wife
what
was
we
a
called
dirt
them
bag.
then, yeah.
I was a horrible stoner, but I kind of avoided that scene. But like, I get your point. I get your point.
Because drinking was so social. It seems so antisocial. It seems so like I'm in a basement hiding out doing stuff.
Right.
Like when I was drinking, it was fun. It was social. I was getting laughs. I just loved drinking because of that. Because the ambiance.
It made you feel like who you wanted to be.
And I could go to really cool bars. I got here to New York. I would find all the really cool bars. I'm like, this is the life. This is where you drink.
PJ Clark's.
Yeah. Oh my God. the Oak Bar in the Plaza. When I had some extra, when my brothers came to New York, and when Chris first came to New York, I'm like, I'm showing you New York. We're going to go we're going to get a martini at the Oak Bar, like in this beautiful place. And then you get a martini at 21 Club. And yeah, it was.
So what was drinking with Chris in Manhattan like in the beginning?
Honestly, he was working, so I drank probably more. Chris was working his ass off.
Driven, right?
Yeah. He would do stuff like when they wouldn't have a show some weekend, he would go off, or like at the after parties. It was, for me and for Chris, it's like, we're really truly introverts. Everyone thinks, the Farleys are so extroverts. Like, no. But if that's where you want us to go, we'll expend every ounce of energy. We'll give it all. But then I need to just decompress somewhere. I need to like go away and isolate. And for Chris, it was, I'm done entertaining everyone. And I need to kind of
watch TV in my room.
No, I need to like drink. He needed to explode.
Right.
He needed to like
burn it out.
Burn it out.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And in that period where Chris is, his star is rising and you're working here, how often are you at SNL?
It was great. I used to go all the time. And I would just hang out in his dressing room. I don't need a ticket. I'll just hang out in your dressing room. I just want to see at one time, I remember one time he called me, do you want to go to the show tonight? I'm like, maybe, who's playing? And he's like, I'm playing, you dick. Like, you can't come now. I'm like, if it was a cool band, I'm like, yeah, I'll definitely go.
Do you remember what were your favorite experiences going to 30 Rock or wherever? Did they do it in 30 Rock?
Yeah. 8H. I had some just funny, just weird experiences. I'll tell you about a couple of them. The first band when Chris was quote unquote that audition, the show we went to, I don't remember who was the guest, but Clapton played, and I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
whoa.
Did Chris meet him? Did he do that?
I'm sure
bit?
I'm sure
He didn't do that Paul McCartney bit with Clapton, though. I don't think.
No. Well, that's a whole McCartney story. That's a whole different shit.
Tell me the story.
Oh, fuck.
What happened?
Okay, talk about dopey shit. So I don't know. He had done this, and with that Chris Farley show skit was so much more than Matt Foley. That was so Chris. That was the Chris I grew up with. That I had to share a bedroom with, and like, go to bed, dude. Stop asking me these questions. So that day,
Would he ask them to you in that kind of style? Like,
yeah, no, it was amazing to see him doing that with Martin Scorsese, and I'm like, oh my God, it was just, we'd be in bed, and he would go like, remember that scary movie we saw? Remember that scary movie we saw? It's like, hey, we just turned off the TV. It's like, yeah, it's pretty scary. What would you rather be in a room with Frankenstein or the Wolfman? And I'm like, Frankenstein, because I got outrun him. It's like, no, it's a really small room. He definitely got you. I'm like, all right, the Wolfman. And he'd bite me, and it'd be over. No, you turn a werewolf. I'm like, would you just, you freak, go to bed?
So let me hear the Paul McCartney story. This is the funniest thing I ever heard.
A buddy of mine was getting married, one of my Georgetown buddies, and we were going to have the bachelor party in New York. So a couple of us lived here. Then a lot of people came in from out of town, and so we met for lunch down on like 23rd Street. And the thought was, let's see each other, get riled up for the night, pound them down, but then go back to our hotels or apartments and sleep it off until it was go time again. So that's what everyone did. But I took two of my buddies, and I'm like, you want to see Chris? You want to go up and see Chris? And they go, yeah. I knew I could take the whole group. So the three of us went up to 8H at 30 Rock. And one of my buddies, Neil, is a huge, Beatles fan. Actually, both of them were huge Beatles. I was like, let's go see Paul. Paul's here this weekend. But we were half in the bag. And so we get up there, and Chris couldn't have been nice. Chris, these are my older brother's friends, so he made me look like a king. Like, yeah, I'll show you around. So he's showing all of us around the whole studio, and just like, yeah. And then we go by this door that's closed, and behind the door we hear, "Hey Jude." And like, all of us go like, we're not moving until that door opens. We're like, and Chris goes, all right. And it's song over, and he was practicing. So and then Paul comes on, and he goes, "Hey Paul, I want you to meet my brother Tommy." And he takes one look at me, and he goes, "The serious brother. I got me one of them too." I'm like, "Oh, okay. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Hey Paul, good to meet you, but Jagger was on last week. You got some big shoes to fill." And he goes, "Yeah, he's been dogging me my whole career." And then I went one step further. I go, "But hey, man, this is SNL. This could really make your career. This is going to make your career." And Chris, the look on Chris's face, like, "Oh my God." And then my buddy Neil chimes in and is like, "Yeah, but it's a huge TV audience, and like maybe some Grecian formula, kind of doctor up." And Chris goes, "You cocky Georgetown son, you get that." Yeah, literally by the ear.
In front of Paul.
Yeah, just like, "You're gone."
Right.
And like, it just literally drags us to the elevator. Like, I can't, you're giving shit to a Beatle. And I'm like, yeah. And we were drunk, so we were like, yeah, okay.
And he took it well, though.
He did, but it was like, okay, I got to work here. And like, this is,
it's amazing. I think the most amazing part of the story is that he's still practicing "Hey Jude" fucking 30 years later.
Yeah, it's just a little sound check. Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. The whole thing is amazing. When do you start to see that Chris is doing drugs?
I knew in college, he would talk about weed. He loved weed. That was his thing. And then he got into mushrooms, and he loved it. And I'm like, okay, as long as he keeps it kind of earthy, I guess we're all right.
And you never smoked weed with him or ate mushrooms with him?
I probably smoked, and I've never done mushrooms.
You've never done mushrooms?
No.
All right, that's interesting.
I know. So, I'd hear these things, and I'm like, all right, it didn't seem like it was that bad, but he was, the pot, like he was like heavy into that. I'm like, yeah, I've done that. That's not a good thing. But what do it still didn't seem like it was going to be, because he was still like
working.
He was doing his stuff. He was on Second City.
And then he was on SNL.
SNL, yeah.
And it's not like he was like, I'm going to stop smoking weed, I'm sure. I'm sure he was just doing his thing.
And again, to us, like, no, it's the alcohol is going to kill us. we knew that from the start, that, that's what's going to do it. So when he got out here, he started talking about cocaine. It was like, and it was late 80s, and I had some friends, and I went down that road a little bit, and I didn't like it. And then there was one night in Madison, back home in Madison, that we came back from New York, and we were in some parking garage late at night, and Chris had, and that was the only time we ever did drugs together. We did these lines, and I'm like, I didn't like coke to begin with. I really didn't like doing it with my little brother.
What did it make you feel like?
It just felt like, God, I'm supposed to be a better older brother than this. I just felt that. But I also wanted to bond with him. And, it was Chris, we always had this kind of love-hate kind of thing going on because we were kind of different, but we were brothers. And so whenever we kind of grew apart, we tried to find some way to kind of bring it back in. At that point, I probably thought it was doing some drugs with him. And I knew right away, it's like, this ain't it.
When you did coke with him, how was he on SNL at that point, or was it before all that?
I think it was before all that. It was definitely before all that.
So you knew it was kind of like in the background of what he was doing. Like he liked drugs, and it was obvious. It escalated to such a crazy point in New York. When did you start being like concerned?
Well, again, our concern was he's going to lose this dream job, and he lost it for a couple. He got suspended, and it was bad, and so he started going into started his treatment run. He went through a lot of treatment things, and he still kind of would snap back. But even then, it wasn't really, the family wasn't really engaged. We saw it as Chris's problem. We don't have a problem. It's weird. I noticed the first time I went into an AA meeting, I felt the same thing years ago when I was, just being sober, not being in recovery. I'm like, I'll try AA. And I remember the first time going in and thinking like, well, I don't drink as much as that guy. Or
right.
That guy takes drugs too. So I guess I'm okay. I don't need to be here. That was what it was like in our family. As long as there was Chris around,
he was the one who could be the
we
fuck
didn't
up.
have to have the problem.
Right.
And I have this image, I talk about it all the time. The one time, I think maybe the second time he came out of Hazleton, and it was a Christmas time, and the family was all together. We're all like in college or out of college. And Christmas Eve, we're opening presents and drinking the brandies. And I have this image in my head of just seeing Chris there with his mug of coffee, just trying to be sober, and the rest of us just doing our shit like we always did, not seeing that. Like, now that I'm in recovery, I'm like,
fuck.
Oh my God,
right.
What a hard thing to try to be in this family sober when we just didn't see it.
And did he ever talk about struggling with being sober or struggling with drugs? Did he talk about it at all?
No, the key for him, he had a couple of stints in treatment, and he would come back to New York, and it would just, something would trigger, and he would be back down the road again. And then, like, second time coming out of Hazleton, he did one thing differently. Hazleton said, well, we got this new sober living house in Lower Manhattan. Maybe you should do that. And he goes, okay. And so instead of going back to his nice big apartment on Riverside Drive, he went down to this, he was on TV every night, every weekend, and checking into a cot for 3 months, and working his recovery program. And he came out of that, with a program, with a new, and that's when he just became the funniest guy. When drugs and alcohol weren't robbing him of this talent, it's just like, holy, he lit up. He lit up, and he, all of a sudden, from my measurements, he started dressing well. I'm like, okay, he's starting to act like a professional, a
superstar.
Yeah. And I was really proud of that. But I was never more proud. Again, now that I didn't know it at the time, I was just like, this is different. He asked me, he said, Tommy, can you, there were two things, two stories. He said, I'm doing my third anniversary of sobriety, and I'm doing a meeting. Can you come and be there? And I didn't know what are you talking? I don't know what me, I knew it was A. I what do you mean you're sharing me? So he gave me the address, and this was so Chris. I'm like, I got the address, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden I'm getting farther and farther on the west side, and I feel like all of a sudden I'm realizing I'm in the middle of Hell's Kitchen. I'm like, that son of a bitch! Like, why did he do this to me? And I got to this building where the address was, and I'm like, I saw people walking in and going upstairs, and I'm like, shit, is this really where he's been going for 3 years? To this meeting, it looked like something out of Beirut. You know, every bum from the neighbor was up there, and I got up there, and there was Chris at a table,
The podium, whatever. Yeah.
you know, in his blazer, and everyone else is just like, I don't know what they were, but he's in his little blazer, and he's saying, you know what? I am no different from you, from anyone in this room, and I'm in the back room going, yeah,
Yes,
you're
you
a
are.
little different,
Right.
Come on, man. And he starts talking like, I woke up this morning hoping and praying that I would be sober today, just like everyone here. And we now here we are at the end of the day. We did it. You know, we get cake and coffee as the payoff. Like, isn't life great? And I'm
It's
like,
incredible.
who
There was
is this guy? I'm like, I had never seen that aspect of Chris.
Were you sober then?
No,
So were you haunted by it at all? Were you like, maybe I need to make some different life
I
choices?
just was really happy for Chris. It was kind of neat, you know, to see that. And then the other story that I was, you know, I love to talk about is when my son was born he was born in 94, so late 94. So he was probably in his 4th year at SNL, close to his last. And my son had he was in New York hospital, and he had some kind of thing with his heart. They go, well, we got to keep him, and you know, for a week, you know, to get this hole in his heart healed. But he was this big hulking kid. He was very healthy. So the week after that, my wife came home, and we went to pick Tommy up at New York Hospital, and Chris had an apartment down on 17th and 2nd. And we go, Chris, can you take the 2 older girls? You know, we had our 2 older girls were like 2 and 3 at the time. Can you take the girls? And we go, yeah, sure. And he was so like, really? It's like, I'm so like, yeah. So we come into the city to drop the girls off. I'm ringing this doorbell outside. It's saying no answer. I'm like, you know, you're always kind of like
Scared of the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, dude, what happened? Like, tell me this. And just when I was like, and my wife's like, oh man, now what do we do? I look up the block and I see Chris come around the corner with these 2 bags. First of all, 2 huge purple Barney dolls, big stuffed animals, with these bags of filled with Cheetos, ice cream, and movies from Blockbuster, like Disney movies. And he's like, I'm so excited. And we're like, oh man. And he was so happy that I asked him.
He was proud that he could actually do it.
Girls. And we took pictures, and there were some of the greatest pictures of my girls with their uncle, just with the Cheetos and the Barney doll. It was a great, that Chris in recovery was amazing to see.
Do you remember the relapse?
Oh God, yeah. I was with him. I think it was the relapse. So again, I was living in Manhattan still. So he was after SNL. So he was doing.
He wasn't in SNL.
You know, he had just got done, and he was doing Black Sheep. He went out. That was his next movie, and he wasn't really happy with it. He wanted to do other things, but there was a 2-movie deal. David needed him to I need a movie.
Spade.
Spade needed a movie, and they want us to do another Farley Spade movie. It's like, and you're about to launch. So David knew. David was smart enough to know, I got to get him now. And so they did this. They fast tracked this movie. And Chris what was another amazing thing about Chris was, I always looked at him as this knucklehead that just had this natural talent. And this was the time when I saw that, holy crap, he knows his craft. He really became an expert in stuff. And unfortunately, he had to do this movie, and he knew it wasn't funny. He worked so hard. So he said, we're doing a sneak preview out in Jersey. You want to come? I'm like, yeah. We're going to sneak in the back. You mean Dave, we're going to sneak in the back, and it's going to be a audience viewing, see what it was like. And so I pick him up at his home. He was at the Waldorf or something like that. And I go to his home. There's, the limo pickups up in a second. And he's in his room, and he's going in into the mini bar, just like putting all these like mini bottles in his pockets. I'm like, what, dude? You know, you've been sober for like 3 years. What are you doing? I didn't know how this worked. And he goes, you know, the limo drivers like, you know, like they like when I give them, you know, I kind of hand out bottles. Didn't even talk to me like
To the driver.
Exactly. It's like, it made sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I would too if I was driving all night. So, okay. So we go to this,
Because he didn't want to admit to
yeah.
you.
Oh God. Yeah. And so we get to this movie theater and David's there, Sherry Lansing from the studios there. So I could tell that he knew the movie wasn't so good, but he had all these like big people and like he just couldn't handle it. And he started, I don't know what else he was doing, but at one point before the movie, he goes, I gotta go to the bathroom. And I'm like, yeah, I do too. So we go, and it was just like this one stall kind of room. And I walk in with him. He goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm like, dude, we've done this our entire lives, you know, at the same time. He goes, no, I need my privacy. I'm like, okay, prima donna. Okay, star. But you know, that's what he was doing. He was in there.
You think he was doing coke?
Oh, I know he was, because then I'm like, okay, movie's over. I'm going home. Chris was going out. And I get this call the next day from my father. It's like, what the hell did you do? I'm like, what? He goes, he ruined his hotel room, and he
Trashed the hotel room.
Trashed the hotel room, you know, and it was like full on relapsed episode. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that. I didn't. When I look back, I'm like, that's what he was doing. I like, you know what? I didn't know.
And do you have any sense? Because like he famously was doing speedballs at the end, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't know.
Did you have any idea when he started with heroin?
I knew when I did. And when that stretch of sobriety, we would sit down and talk. And he said, Tommy, I remember him telling me this. He goes, Tommy, like now that I'm in recovery, I can live this life. I can give up booze and weed, and I love those two things more than I'm like, I loved them, but I can give that up. I'm thinking the right way, but I didn't take heroin that many times. Somebody gave it to me, and I said, okay, that is the devil, Tommy. It's because that is on my mind all the time.
When did he talk to you about that?
This was at his tail end of his SNL career, and again, he had been sober for 3 years. He had taken some heroin, sporadically at that last time, that like his second year on SNL second. And that's when he like, you need treatment. It wasn't because of the drinking it was, I think, and Chris even knew like something's happened here.
I've crossed the line.
Yeah, I've crossed the line. And so, and he managed to do this sobriety thing and then work in this recovery, and it was on the booze, weed, and coke front. He was like, I can do this. I can do this recovery if it was just that, but it ain't. Like, I can walk into a bar and not get triggered, like, oh, I need a drink, but I'll like see like a smell, or you said like or somebody that looks like somebody that,
Sure.
It was like, and it was front of mind, and like, there it is.
No, I mean, I'm a heroin addict
Yeah.
in recovery, and I just told you we went to this Zoom about cravings, and it's like cravings are everywhere, and they're the weirdest things, and you don't know why. It's because heroin is so fucking insidious.
So he's telling me about this, and I'm like, and this was 25 years ago. I'm like, wow, really? And until I got into the treatment field years later and met a lot of people that,
Had that experience.
I'm like, Chris talked to me about this.
See, that's one of the reasons that I brought up Belushi, not because of his style, but because of the drugs that he did. And that the fact that Chris did the same drugs and had the same style. And it made me wonder if he's like, I need to do this to be that. Or if it quelled the same thing in both of them.
I can see, who knows? There's an easy argument to be made for that.
I'm not making any.
No,
argument.
I could
See it.
support that.
Right.
But I also just think that just the way Chris was, it was always something more. It had nothing to do with Belushi. It was just pure, absolute. This is what addiction does. There are some people that need the next thing. Otherwise, why the hell would anybody be messing around with fentanyl if it wasn't the next thing?
Right.
It is a death sentence, but to some people, all it is the next thing. It's more.
Right. And it's like, and when you talk about him needing to explode, it's also, the oblivion kind of does the trick, so you don't have to explode.
Yeah.
And
I guess, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's,
I get it.
It's all consuming. I've read a lot about him, and I've seen a lot of, weird kind of TV movies about Chris. And it always goes back to that Chippendales sketch.
Yeah.
Like that one's there's so many iconic sketches that Chris was in, but supposedly that one fucked him up.
Nah.
No?
Yeah, possibly. Here's when I did my book and I interviewed Chris Rock, and he was one of the first person that pointed that out, how messed up that was. Why would they make Chris do that? And first of all, I wasn't going to dispute that. That's Chris Rock's
experience.
And I wanted that in my book. But what I was thinking at the time was like, you're so wrong. Because I've seen Chris do that Chippendales skit since 12 years old. I mean, every bar we went to in college,
Right.
they were literally, the band would go on break. It was like, all right, we'll see you in 15 minutes. And they'd pipe in music, and we'd all go to the bar, and we'd turn around like, what's Chris doing? And he'd be out alone on the dance floor with his shirt off doing the exact same skit way before Chippendales. Like, so to
That's
me,
funny.
It was a series of stuff. There was also the opening, the monologue that he did when he came back to host SNL, and he was really messed up then. And he was, I'm not going to get fucked up tonight. He was like, this whole thing about him being such a messed up guy. And there was also another skit they made him do called Relapse Guy. A guy that's constantly relapsed. I'm like, so they were constantly hitting that, and I think was kind of mean. It's really not, it's people that don't understand addiction.
Right. And they have to live with it now too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's like you take, and it's crazy in that world where you have figures who are dying all over the place since time immemorial, and to have somebody as fragile and as addicted as Chris, and to play the comedy against it. It's a really fucking risky maneuver. It's balls, because you're banking on the fact that he won't die.
Right? Because you don't want to go there. You don't want to think that. And yeah, at a certain point, it's funny till it's not. And so you start writing that script because it's funny, and then all of a sudden it's not, and you keep writing, and
something similar happened to us. Like my partner, who I started the show with, his name was Chris. We would talk about the greatest show would be when one of us relapsed, and then he relapsed and he died. And half the audience thought it was a stunt. They didn't think it actually had happened. And part of me hoped, like I had a dream where I thought he was alive and it was a lie. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing didn't really happen because it's so crazy. When he died, where were you? How did you find out?
That's interesting. Well, so I was, so this was, 97. I don't think I even had a cell phone. I was living in Fairfield, Connecticut. Well, two stories. Like, I'll go back to that last hosting thing. I was working in Greenwich for a bank, and it was Wednesday. And I remember calling my wife. I'm like, and she called me, when are you coming home? Every night, every day. When are you coming home? Standard call. And I go, it's weird. It's Wednesday. I know Chris is in town doing SNL this week. And I'm like, he hasn't called me. Like, it's weird.
Because if he's in town, he was living in California.
Yeah.
So
in Chicago and California.
He's a movie star, and he's coming to New York to host the show.
Like,
why wouldn't he call you?
Yeah. Because he knows if he doesn't, I'm going to tell mom and dad. But anyway, my wife said, like, just go into the city and see if you find, go. I'm like, yeah, I should. And I went. I drove down, and I went to his apartment. It was a place, they had him in the Waldorf. And I called up to his room. Was like, hey, man. And, it was one of these, like, I am way off the reservation. I don't want anyone in the family to see this, even though the whole country's going to see it this weekend. But so he said, yeah, good to see you. I'm glad you came on. I'm just about to go over to the show we're going to do some writing tonight, obviously. So we get in this limo, and they had this like intern there, this young intern that was supposed to watch him. And Chris goes, yeah, I got to pick up some friends. And can you go to this address? And next thing I know, we're on 130th and I don't know what, East Harlem. And he picks up, I mean, it looked like a scene right out of the movie Arthur. These two girls come with these tight, hawker pants.
Classic prostitution.
Classic.
Yes.
And this intern's looking at me and I'm like, dude, you're getting paid for this. I'm out. Like, this is your job. And we go up to, the studio with these two girls and everyone's like, and I'm seeing all these people I knew, everyone at SNL, and they're like, Tommy, what? I'm like, I don't know. And he's going into everyone's office trying to let's come up with some ideas. And I'm sitting there with these two girls. I'm like, where did you go to school? I don't know.
Right.
It was weird. And I'm like, I gotta go home. I gotta go.
You're okay. I gotta go.
You're okay. And the last thing I remember, I walked out. He was in this room with Tracy Morgan and Jim Brewer, and those three were, I don't know what they were talking about. They were coming up with ideas, and they were just laughing their frigging balls off. And I just like, wow. And I've told Jimmy Brewer this many times. We were good friends. And I'm like, that was the last time I saw Chris. And that laughter will stay with me. Thank you. I know he wasn't in the greatest, but I heard him just splitting. All three of you just laugh. It was
and that's everything.
It's everything. It was so great. So the next day I went back. I got a good friend of ours from Wisconsin who Chris just couldn't bullshit. The guy, Kevin Cleary, who we're going to go down. Actually, my mom and I we're going to go down to 9/11 and say a prayer over his grave. That's where he ended up.
How did he die there?
He was in he was in the Tower 2 and he went down with the ship. Yeah. And so we're going to go say hi to Kevin. But Kevin was Chris's kind of,
they were tight.
They were tight. And Chris couldn't bullshit him. Kevin was he was so patient and he was just an amazing guy. And so I go to I call up. It's like, hey, Chris, I said yes last night we have lunch. I got Kevin Cleary with me. He was like, you can tell, like, uh-oh.
He didn't want to be seen.
Intervention coming.
Right.
And so he goes, give me a half hour. Let me hop in the shower. So Kevin and I sit down, and then I call back up a half hour later, and he's put a block on the phone. No incoming phone. I'm like, so we went, and then like a month. So that was October. So December, I'm in a friend's office in Fairfield, Connecticut, where we lived, and he went to Georgetown. He and I went to Georgetown, and he had some entertainment experience. He did some production stuff, and we were in there trying to come up with some like really cool project that we could include Chris. Like, let's come up. Who do you know that we can do something cool? And he had next to his desk a TV that he always had playing, and he just muted it, turned the volume down when it was a meeting. But he had CNN constantly looping. And out of the corner of my eye, in the middle of this meeting, I look over and I see Kristen Spade. I look over and I'm like, on CNN, I'm like, now, what's he up to now? I mean, I just like, because he went back to California. And as I turn up the volume, it shows his apartment in Chicago, the John Hancock building, with an ambulance up front. And the anchor is saying, like, we just heard, Chris Farley is, died of a drug overdose. And I'm like, I heard it on CNN. That's how I heard.
Horrible.
It was shocking. And I'm like, and my buddy just goes, there's the phone, and I called home. And as soon as
Who'd you call?
My dad. I called home. And as soon as my dad picked up the phone, I'm like, heard his voice. It's like, fuck. It is. This is happening. And I drove like the 1.5 miles, 2 miles back to my home from downtown in Fairfield. I don't remember it. I just was
gone.
Just lost it. Just tears, But what shook me out of that was I had to spend the rest of the night fielding calls and literally Access Hollywood on my doorstep with the crew. Like, can we get a statement? Like, no, you can't. At least I had enough, experience with the media and entertainment to tell them to, like, you don't get this piece of me.
Right.
I feel sorry for people that don't know that they can tell the media no. But
And I can't imagine what it did to your family, your mother. Like how, it was just must have been.
it was so surreal. It was, but it was just this whole, big funeral. It was just, and a lot of memorials. And so that definitely took a lot of the pain away because we got to share
Distraction and stuff.
Yeah. But,
And the fact that the world mourned him.
Yeah.
It probably meant a lot.
it meant a lot. Then but then after that, we had to deal with it in our own way, But, one of the blessings I say to people, like, see, my dad died a year after that. And that's more like most people's experience with loss, especially the loss of a loved one. After 6 months, nobody asked me about my dad anymore. Siblings maybe, but nobody comes up and is like, God, your dad was so great. Or remember that time your dad did this? I would love that. Anyone would love that. Keep that person alive. With Chris, I get that every single day of my life.
Right.
Last 25 years. And that's a blessing. He is a part of, he is as alive. I cherish just down to moments like this, even though we're talking about addiction, but we talked a lot about recovery. I mean, and we talked about Chris, who he was. And, people don't get to do that.
No, it keeps him alive 100%.
And it's just a wonderful thing.
And then you guys did the Chris Farley Foundation.
I did, yeah.
And what was the point of it?
Well, the point, it was, it's funny. I knew right away after that, I needed to tell Chris's story. I needed to go into schools and try to prevent people from going down that road. And I remember I went out with a woman whose son had also overdosed from heroin. And this was a mother. I was going out with a mother, and it was very emotional. And, it was very, don't do this kind of like, kind of make better choices kind of thing. And with a lot of tears. And I'm like, again, I'm Irish. I'm like, we bury that emotion. I'm like, I can't do that yet, at least not now. So what do? I've got this Chris Farley's name. I got these young kids I want to talk to. I'm like, well, I mean, I got to use humor. I know it's a serious subject matter, but I got to use humor. And I looked at all my brothers that went through Second City and learned improv. And I'm like, all these prevention things I've noticed in schools. I'm a marketing guy. So I got that. I knew how to build a brand. So I could do that. But I also looked at like these school prevention programs are, because they're in schools and delivered by professional teachers, they're going to be very information-based, knowledge-based, education-based. So I'm like, well, okay, that's not my skill set. So I can't add to that. What can I add?
How do we reach these people?
How do we, you're throwing all this information, giving them pamphlets on methamphetamines, obviously isn't doing the trick. So I said they needed a tool to use that information. And I looked at improv, which was a communication tool, how to create ensembles, how to build trust, how to build acceptance. I'm like, that's it. It's connection. 25 years ago, I saw the need for connection. And so I would go in teaching improv. And why is this important? Because you're creating peer enhanced environments and not peer pressure environments.
And fun.
And having fun, which is your freaking kids. So, and the better fun, healthier fun, safer fun.
Right. I mean,
So-
that's kind of like the genesis of Dopey. You know what I mean? The genesis of
Yeah.
Dopey was to have fun around this topic and to be together. So like you're basically carrying a recovery message on behalf of your love.
I was talking about somebody else's addiction.
Right. And meanwhile, you're drinking.
I'm drinking or
Dry.
just being it's just being dry.
So how did recovery come to you in that moment?
So I would have these moments of these. I would put together 5 years. It's like I could do that, and I did that a couple times.
You would get 5 years without a program.
Yep. And then my mind would go like, well, it's St. Patrick's Day. You can have a Guinness. You've been sober for 4 years. Like what's the, you got this. You're cured.
I can have a drink once in a while.
You know how to manage this. And it was amazing how quick I was back on varsity. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, I was just back like quickly as bad as then I would do it again, after more like train wrecks and divorce and this. I'm like, maybe I got to stop drinking. And I would always come back. And because I wasn't in recovery, that's pure and simple.
But you're always talking about the tragedy and triumphs of your brother.
Yep.
And meanwhile, you're not plugged into that thing.
So 4 years ago, I got to that point now. It was just before COVID, and I had a great summer. We got some money in, and I just spent the summer just having a great time. And by that, I mean, like, what was amazing to me was I was smart enough to identify the changes in my logic. Like I would go out and I would tell myself, okay, if I leave right now, I can make it home safely, which at that point, it was already too late. Like, yeah, that's how stupid it was. But it was like, if I leave right now, I can go. So I was like 9:30, was like, Farley, where are you going? And I'm like, I got to go home. I'm done. But I wasn't done.
I survived tonight.
Yeah, but I wasn't done. I would get home and go, okay, well,
here we go.
Look at this whole liquor lap, and I would spend, a lot of late nights watching some movie that I got really emotionally sappy with in my drunken stupor. Like, this is the greatest movie. And and I'd start freaking tweeting. I'm like, oh, Jesus, this is bad.
Drunk tweeting.
Yeah, bad. Or I was, I was like, all right, I got to go home now, but like, what back roads can I take? And I was like, plotting my how to avoid the police kind of, routine. I'm like, I was smart enough and I was getting way too old. And like, this is dumb. So I stopped again. I'm like, I got to stop. And I saw somebody that I really respected that I knew he was a musician. And I went to see him. He was playing
Clapton?
What? No, some local guy. And he was playing at a brewery on a Sunday afternoon. And I'm like, great, I can see this guy who I like. I like his music, but I could be at a brewery and I could on a Sunday on a beautiful day drinking. And I started I was just pounding, and I knew this guy was in recovery. And I'm like, what is he looking at? He's looking at me just sitting there. And so the next day I just said, like, I'm done. I'm in. I want to be that guy. And I stopped. And I was like 4 months dry. And a wonderful woman that started a treatment clinic in Madison that I had done some work with her kids doing the improv stuff years ago. It was funny. I started doing improv as a prevention tool until she got me into, can you talk to my recovery IOP groups? And I realized, what's this all about? It's like, well, it's about building trust and acceptance. I'm like, that's what I'm doing over here. I'm like, it was amazing. So I started, and she called me up. She says, how you doing? I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm like, very proudly tell her I haven't had a drink in 4 months. And she goes, oh, that's wonderful. Like, we should have coffee. I'm like, I'd love to get coffee. Like, I'd love to connect. She goes, well, okay, well, we'll meet me Saturday morning, 9:00 in the basement of the Presbyterian Church. I'm like, okay.
I see what you're doing.
I gotcha. But this was somebody I trusted, and I said yes. And I went, and I just shut my mouth and listened. And I was like, I just started really changing. I was always like all my brothers were always that disruptive person. If a funny thought goes in my head, it's coming out the door. And like in classes, in business meetings, I would be that guy with no filters. I'm like, but all of a sudden I would do that in an AA meeting, and I was not getting the response. I was like, people were like, okay, yeah. And like I would read. Anybody want to read, how it works, chapter 5? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And I'll read it in a British accent. And we're like, okay. You're that guy. And I'm like, this isn't working. And I just stopped doing that, put some filters on and listened. And I'm like, okay, this is not about how much you drink. This is about something completely different. And it really, the thing that hit me like between the eyes was the first time I heard the words rigorous honesty. Right. I'm like, holy shit. If that's what this program gives me and helps me, I mean, that is just what a burden off my shoulder. Like, I have lived this life of, like, I was delivering what I thought people wanted to see. They wanted to see Chris Farley's brother. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you Chris Farley's brother. Not only was it honest, but I'm like, this whole program was like, showing them who Tom Farley is like, and seeing if they like him, seeing if I like this guy. And it's just been that kind of a journey since.
Rigorous honesty it's just an incredibly exciting phrase. It's an incredible opportunity for anybody. Because once you can experience rigorous honesty, you're kind of in the clear.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and then when you don't practice rigorous honesty, you're like, uh-oh.
I see it.
You know.
Yeah, you totally know. That's your barometer. Yeah, like, okay.
Well, listen, I have one more question, and it's just like, how much of Tommy in Tommy Boy?
Oh, that's a great question, and this is a true story too. So as I said, when my son was born, I named him Tommy the Third. After my dad and me, and he's Tommy the Third. And at that time, he was doing the movie was called Billy the Third, and he was going to be Billy Callahan the third. And that was fine. And then, but Lauren came to Chris and said, well, Adam's movie's coming out first, and it's Billy Madison. We can't have two Billys. You got to change the name. And so all of a sudden he's like, all right, I'll be Tommy Callahan the third, and I'll be Tommy Boy. And he told me that. I'm like, oh, that's so after,
beautiful. After
Dad, me, and Tommy, and literally Chris looked at me and said, no, after Dad and Tommy. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I deserve that. And so my son Tommy the third is he's
Tommy
legit
Boy.
Tommy Boy, yeah.
Does it put pressure on him?
No, he is so good about and now that he's in this field and out in L.A. and he hangs out with Spade, and Spade is kind of taking him on his ring, but he just is not doing that. He's just being, my name's Tom Farley, but I'm Tom Farley the third. I'm like, I'm not nobody's nephew, nobody's. If it comes up,
it's amazing stories and it's an amazing legacy. But I get it.
Yeah.
How about Adam Sandler's song? Did that fuck you up?
No, it was just
so beautiful.
It
right?
was so beautiful, and what was really nice before he had done it a couple times on the road, and my brothers Kevin and Johnny kind of did a couple shows with him, and I knew it was pretty amazing. And then when he was going to host SNL and play it, he literally called my mom. He said, Ms. Farley, how you doing? Have you seen the song? I did show it to her. And he goes, do you mind if I play it? I'm going to do it on national. She goes, it's beautiful, Adam. Absolutely.
Incredible.
So, yeah, it was really something special.
Tom, I can't thank you enough. This was really, really, really exciting for me. Yeah. Really cool. I really, really appreciate your candor. And Tom works at Rosecrans. If you're fucked and you want to get help, you can go to Rosecrans.
Yeah, we got some. 100 years it's been around, and it's very kind of understated, but it's an amazing program. We got a really specialized program for veterans, and first responders that like really deals with, like, obviously that's special trauma that humans aren't supposed to see. So you don't want to have them sharing in the general population. So we do a really good job with that specific. But it's mental health and substance abuse. So I love that I'm finally, I've talked and advocated for addiction for so long, telling Chris's story, telling my story, and then COVID hit, and I'm like, I was talking about what's coming after COVID. People are leaving this pandemic with behaviors they didn't have going in. And I'm like, right. I gotta get people into treatment, and I finally, after so many years of wondering what I'm going to be when I grow up, I think I've finally found it.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been amazing for me. So thank you.
It's been fun. Yeah.
Has this not been the greatest podcast you've ever been on?
Yeah.
Kidding me?
This really was good.
All right, good.
It was good stuff.
Yeah, it was good for me. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you, man. So that was Tom Farley, and I was kvelling at the end, and I'm still kvelling. It really was emotional. I felt like it was a real conversation, and I've been doing a million of these episodes, and sometimes they really I don't know, it was powerful for me, and I also see some serious similarities between Chris Farley and Chris of Dopey, and so it just, for some reason, it made me very, very emotional. We have a bunch of voicemails from hardcore old school dopes that I've had just sitting around. And I feel like Tom Farley is a classic alcoholic. Chris Farley was a horrible drug addict, but also a classic alcoholic. And Chris from Dopey obviously was classic alcoholic and a horrible drug addict. Now, Dan Allen Sr. is just a horrible classic alcoholic. He also has a podcast called The Movie Cellar. He's been on this show. He's been on numerous Patreon shows. He was at DopeyCon. He sent me this story, and I have to play it. So here he is, Dan Allen Sr.
Yo, Dave, this is Dan, and I just called because I wanted to share a quick story with you. The other day on the show, you guys were talking about the saying, my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking or using, and how that saying's kind of bullshit. And I totally agree with that. And it made me think of this story because this is like a great memory. And if every day that I drank was like this day, I'd still be drinking. But the reality is that most days were not like this. which is why I haven't had a drink in like 4.5 years. But anyway, this one time, my wife and my brother and I were invited to a wedding. It was kind of a weird situation because it was this girl that we grew up with. We were all dirt poor. We lived in the backwoods of Maine. I mean, this girl's family had like a gas-powered washing machine, which, yes, that is a real thing. Anyway, she's brilliant. She got these big academic scholarships to get into an Ivy League school and everything. And she went on to become a lawyer and moved to New York City. And that's where she met her future husband, this rich dude from a rich family. So the wedding is a bunch of poor Maine country trash and then a bunch of rich people that went to prep schools. So super weird dynamics. And the wedding was hosted at this girls' summer camp, but it was like during the off season. So we stayed there all weekend and slept in the bunks. My wife and I got a babysitter and prepared for the weekend by buying a bunch of cheap liquor. And my brother brought weed and Adderall, and we were set to go. We drank the free liquor that they provided at the open bar, and we hung out with everyone through dinner. And then we went back to our bunk and drank the cheap liquor that we brought. We got smoked up, and then we took a bunch of Adderall. And then we went to the tennis courts, and we just started hitting balls over the mess hall into the woods. We thought it was the funniest thing ever. And once we were done with that, we walked by like 12 Ivy League kids all sharing one joint. And we totally made fun of them because they were acting like they were like super badass. And it was hilarious. And then we went and found there was a bonfire going on. And that's where all the Mainers were hanging out. So I started talking to this one dude, one of her cousins, about the Celtics and Isaiah Thomas, the younger Isaiah Thomas, who was playing on the Celtics at the time. And this dude insists that Thomas did not play for the Celtics. And then at one point in the conversation, he shows me a knife and says he's going to kill me if Isaiah Thomas does in fact play for the Celtics. So I decided that was probably a good time to move along from that conversation. And we went and drank some more and smoked some more and took some more Adderall. And then we decided it was time to pull some pranks. So first thing we did was wrap the bride and groom's bunkhouse door in wrapping paper, which we actually found out later was the bride's mother's bunk, but that's all right. And then we tried to climb on the roof. We thought we'd like bang around and scare everybody, but that just ended up with us falling on the ground and laughing our asses off. And then I came up with the idea to run my boxers up the flagpole. So I got them off and we put them up the flagpole. And eventually, after playing on the playground for a while, we finally went to bed around like 3 a.m. Well, the next morning I went to breakfast and a bunch of people said hi to me like I was their best friend. I didn't remember any of them, but I guess I had met them the night before. And then we attended the wedding ceremony, which was on the main lawn of the camp. And over the ceremony, over the bride and groom flying in the beautiful sky, was my boxers up the flagpole. It was perfect and majestic, and I was very proud of myself. I'm still very proud of that moment. Anyway, thanks, Dave. Stay strong, Dopey Nation. Fucking toodles for Chris.
Yeah, I love Dan. It's not the dopiest story in the world, but I just love Dan. Dan has a podcast called The Movie Cellar, and Dan is sober because he has horrible alcoholic stories too. It's not all just running boxers and hating on rich people with your rough and tumble poor Mainers, but I cannot say enough good things about Dan. I just love to hear his voice, and I'm happy that he sends in a voicemail. And Dan gets socks. So if you want socks, send in a voicemail, send in an email, cajole me into reading it. Do I owe you anything? Write me an email. Remind me that I owe you something. Send it to dopeypodcast@gmail.com. Don't be a stranger. That's what I'm really, really pushing for unity in the Dopey Nation. And there is mostly unity in the Dopey Nation. But actually, speaking about unity in the Dopey Nation, like what's going on in Reddit? Like you guys have to get active. I need Reddit to be, now I know Reddit's going to like make fun of me. I want Reddit to have a resurgence. Cormac, I want to give Cormac a shout out for setting up Reddit. I want to give all the admins a shout out. Who did I not give a shout out to last time? Fucking Katie B. Katie B lets the light shine always. Somebody got upset that I didn't. Dave Mascalani. Dave Mascalani, I think, always needs a shout out. So let's give a big shout out to David Mascalani. And there's some new reviews. So before we end the show, I just want to call my dad with the new reviews. So I'm calling my dad.
Hello?
You're on the show.
Oh, hi. Hello, everybody. You know what just happened? I did Wordle, and I put in Dopey as my first word, and I got it in 2. Amazing.
I got it in 2 too. What did I put as my first word? I put in, hold on, stand by. See, that's annoying that you got it in 2 from that. I put in, hold on. It won't show me my first fucking guess. Oh yeah, I put blunt in first. And then of course I knew it was braid. How did you figure it out? Who cares?
How did you get from blunt to braid?
Well, I thought it was gonna. I thought it was gonna be brain, but I used the N in blunt, so I figured it was braid.
Amazing.
But how often do you get it in 2 guesses?
Not very often, no.
You know, somebody recently wrote me on Instagram, right? And you know what Instagram is?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, whatever about, yes.
So somebody wrote me on Instagram, and they were a really big fan of the show, and I don't think they thought I was going to respond to them, right? And he writes, I've been listening to Dopey and backwards, and I love the show, and you know he seemed like he was a big fan, but he was up to the episode. Do you remember when that lady, the English lady from the BBC, came to your house?
Oh yeah, with me brewing tea in the microwave.
Yeah, and Linda was there, and he was like, you're interrupting Alan. You really sound like a jerk. he said I really sounded like a jerk in that episode.
He's right on top of it.
Yeah.
No,
it's rough. It's not.
Anyway,
it's not easy.
You know, for around Thanksgiving, Ginny got this Wordle in 1.
What was the one?
That?
What was the one?
The one right before Thanksgiving, and you know what the word was feast.
Yeah. That was That was a gimme.
Maybe, yeah, I guess.
Well, I didn't get it. I mean, how often do you get them in 2?
Not very often. I feel very happy that I got it in 2. I'm happy I got it in 2, and I'm happy I'm in first place in fantasy.
Oh, here we go, Mr. Gloaty narcissist here.
Let me read these emails because I got to go.
They're not. First of all, shush. They're not emails.
Oh, they're not.
They're reviews.
Yeah.
Secondly, why do you think they're emails, Dad?
I don't know. Listen, it doesn't matter what I think, but I think right now I'm looking at it and it's reviews. They have all these stars on there.
I think I've been diminished to 4th place, but I feel like I'm about to surge.
You're right up there.
I'm about to surge. Seymour has fallen to 2nd place. You're in 1st place, and I think it's good that it's your guys' league and you're winning, so you guys are ahead. But I do think you're in trouble. I think there's injuries a brewing, and I look to see Kevin Durant get hurt soon.
Well, thank you for your thoughts. Yes, I do not appreciate it. If Kevin Durant gets hurt, I'm finished.
Well, I look forward to Durant's injury just on a personal level because of you and because I don't love Kevin Durant or the Nets. Now, people sometimes, I think, write reviews for the show because they want to hear you read the reviews for the show.
I doubt that.
Well, I just want to say, we want you to write reviews for the show. On a scale of 1 to 10, Dad, how joyful do the reviews make you when they come in?
No, I like seeing them. I'm just getting a little upset that we're like, being, coveting it, being pretentious and reading these good stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's not good taste to applaud oneself. I don't know.
What do you mean?
But no, it's great.
What do you mean?
Well, you know, if you talk about yourself all the time as being wonderful, that's not a good image.
Well, that's why I love it when
you.
you read the 1-star reviews.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let me just say that New York City Sarah should start writing in, because the last guy you had on the show was certainly an entitled white guy, for sure. Holy cow.
White privilege personified. Did he?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Do you have any
So she would have
opinions?
been right on target with him.
You know, before you read the review, do you want to hear the anti-Diddy email I got?
Oh.
Hold on, I'm
Well.
going to read it to you. I apologize to Diddy. Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Listen, he was very, very brave to be on the show and talk about all that stuff, so I don't think he should be criticized.
And open. Very open and very dopey. And he really, you know, I personally loved...
It was a great show, and he also spent 6 years in prison. So, I mean, you know, his white privilege didn't save him, for sure.
Hold on, I can't find this fucking thing.
No,
Oh,
don't read
Jesus
it.
Christ. I want to read it. I like this kind of stuff. Oh, God, but I can't find it.
Maybe at the end of the show you'll find.
This is the end of the show.
Oh.
This is definitely the end of the show. I'm not going to read it on the show. I'm going to read it on Patreon. I want to give a hearty thank you to Diddy. His show was killer. The Dopey was robust. His ability to talk was endless. We sat in your living room, in the dining area, from 2 p.m. to like 5:30, and it got dark.
I know you missed the train and everything, and I'm going to miss my train if we don't hurry up.
It got
you want
dark.
Me to read some?
Yeah, it got dark while we sat there, so we want to give a big thanks to Diddy. On Patreon, I will read the kind of rough Diddy review. And if you want to listen to it, you join us on Patreon. Now, Dad, please read some reviews. I don't know why you're wasting all this time, Dad.
I'm wasting time?
Read the review.
Holy cow. Real and relatable by Ice Cream, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am someone who struggled with drugs for 30 years and have been lucky to be successful 10 years sober. I love living vicariously through the guest experience and also appreciate the Howard-inspired interviews. Well done. Yeah, give me your thoughts about copying Howard Stern.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I think is this guy true? I mean, is the guy saying a truthful thing? The Howard-inspired interviews?
Well, I think Dopey in itself is Howard Stern inspired. I wanted Dopey to emulate the Stern show of old, and I am Howard Stern inspired. I don't think my interview style is that much like Howard's, but, I think it's a compliment, so I'll take it.
All right, okay, that's good.
Why? What do you think?
You want to read another one?
Why? Do you have an opinion about it?
No, I don't. I never listened to the guy, so I didn't know what he was talking about.
What I want to know is, does Seymour listen? What's his take? Is he worried about me coming up on him?
Seymour hasn't contacted me in about a week, so I don't know what that means.
It's because you took first place.
Yeah, maybe. No, maybe I said something at the last book club meeting that wasn't smart.
What did you say?
Oh, I don't know. I got into an argument with him.
Oh, God. What did you get into? What about what?
The Ukraine war.
What did you say?
Well, I said that Putin, no matter what, Putin was afraid of NATO, that he doing all this horrible atrocities in Ukraine cannot be defended. And Seymour doesn't defend that. He just says that Russia was pushed into it by NATO and was forced to do it.
Hold on, Dad. Hold on. I need to set an alarm clock because you're putting me to sleep. Is Seymour?
Right,
is Seymour?
Let me get going.
Is Seymour still smoking weed?
No, he doesn't smoke weed. Don't say anything bad about Seymour. He's my dearest friend.
I love Seymour, but he's going to go down. Trust me on that. Seymour's a manipulator.
I'm
You
the
and
one.
Seymour are
I'm the one.
dueling banjos of narcissist manipulators. Read another review, please.
Oh, all right. Jerry Stahl, love the long format. I finished 999 last week and unfortunately had to miss Jerry's reading here in Los Angeles. So it was doubly great to hear him on Dopey. I love him and Dopey. I love how long the episodes are. 306 on ketamine. Those guys are doctors. Doubt it. 3 hours of goodness. I love this podcast.
What's your take on the long?
Very long one called "The Reality of Recovery." Maybe you should put that on Patreon. That because he's at the end he says something like he loves the show, but then he says just give those of us on MMT a bit more compassion.
No, read it. Read the shush. Read the review.
Oh, boy. Thank you for putting out the show every week. It provides me a little bit of peace, serenity, and fun for me. This is The Reality of Recovery by John G. 74. We all know recovery can get a bit boring when all of you from society or whatever, all day is just to go to your 12-step meeting and you'll be fine. I hear the dumb crazy being told each week and relish in the fact that I once did that dumb stuff, but I don't have to act like that anymore. Sometime during the podcast, I'll be laughing and I'll look over at my wife and she'll be white as a ghost, just horrified of what she just heard. But our group needs to hear these tales because it helped us understand the realities of life and that everyone's recovery is different. It is all about bettering our daily lives and just being happy with who we are. I had my wife share the podcast with her Al-Anon group, and I'm waiting to hear back as to their thoughts. Thank you, Dave, for all the hard work you do. Keep it up. I truly appreciate it. Just give those of us on MMT a bit more compassion. We are doing what we need to do to stay in recovery. And it was that methadone maintenance treatment. Is that?
That's very impressive. That's what I was going to ask you, Dad. Did you know what? Hold on. Let me see if I can. No, that's not it. No, here, hold on. Wait. Hold on. That's your round of applause for knowing that MMT stands for methadone maintenance treatment. I do give you guys a break. Listen, I put up a video recently on YouTube in front of the methadone clinic, and a lot of people really liked it, and a lot of people didn't like it. But if you go and hang out in front of the methadone clinic, that's what you will hear. And I commend everybody on methadone maintenance, those who are, not using other things, and those who are using other things. You just keep going. Do your best. It's not up to me. You know what I mean? I'm doing my thing. You do your thing, and I wish everybody the best. That's all, right?
Right.
What do you mean,
all
right? Why? Hold on. What do you mean,
Right.
right? You say it so dismissively. You say, right. Yes, David. What are you trying to say, Dad?
I just said, well said, and I need to say goodbye to the Dopey Nation, and everybody be healthy and toodles for Chris.
Hold on. Are you
Dave,
rushing? Are you rushing to the airport to pick up your lady friend?
I'm going to the train station. Okay.
That you don't want to give any details about picking up your lady friend from the airport for a romantic Hanukkah week in New York?
Everybody, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Dave. I'm hanging up on you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that was my dad. And before we go, I want to remind you guys to buy Dopey gear at the website, dopeypodcast.com. There's candles available that maybe you could even still get for Christmas. They're beautiful with delicious scents. We are in a collaboration with the North Avenue Candle Company. And you can go to northavecandlecompany.com/collections/dopey or just click on the link on the dopeypodcast.com page. I have all this fucking shit. I'm going to make a video about all the shit I have in the garage that I want to sell. So stay tuned for that. We're building up to Christmas. And I would love it if you sent in some dopey Christmas stories for the Christmas episode. Send in a voicemail. Make it short. Make it dopey. You will get socks. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris.
All right, I'm going to play this song, but only because I think it'll wake me up a little bit. I'm very tired. I'm just going to start it. No joke.
Until I
do.
And you know I like.
Yeah, you do tell me you didn't like it.
Yeah,
I'm sure you can relate to the calling your dad part.
Dude, it's just really good. Like, where did you write? When did you write that? I like the lyrics. I hope they can hear